The comic book is an underground comic book. It's not Spider-Man or Superman, you know, it's not something for mass consumption. And it has a very hard edge to it. I think that the film is quite faithful to the comic book. I hope that it is, in terms of preserving that hard edge and a certain style that the comic book certainly has. But we had the responsibility to fill in some gaps that aren't necessarily there in the comic book because they're different mediums. You know, you don't have to tell a cohesive narrative story in a comic book. You can do a lot with images and leave a lot up to the imagination of the reader. I would have deeply loved to shoot the whole film in black and white, but personally I love black and white. I think it's wonderful. It would have been great to do that and show perhaps just the flashbacks, which are a part of Eric's real life, his life when he was alive, show those in color as contrast, you know. But unfortunately, due to the realities, the very shitty realities of the film world, we weren't given the opportunity to do that. You're dealing with a supernatural situation, which is a man who has come back from the dead. And I think the thing that I enjoy most about this film is simply the questions that raises for me as an actor playing the part, and for the audience who's going to see the film. If you died and a year had passed since the time that you had died, and during that year you have to assume that the people that you loved and the people who were in your life and loved you would have had a year now to grieve and come to some kind of terms with having lost you. And now suddenly you are given the chance to come back for 2 days. The world would be a very different place through your eyes from the point of view of having been dead for a year and knowing that you only had 2 days now to be alive, in a sense, again. And there would be some fascinating questions that would confront you, like, wouldn't you want to tell somebody? But at the same time, wouldn't you feel a certain responsibility not to trammel in the lives of the people who have had a year now, like I said, to deal with that loss? And you would see the world through these very different eyes, these eyes that are coming from a point of view and a perspective that no one really has. Eric gets the chance to come back and try and see that some kind of justice is done. It's not necessarily a pretty subject, but it's one that I feel comes from him very organically and is quite justified. I'll tell you something, I don't really care about any statements the film makes that have to do with that, because that's not Eric's point of view. I'm sure that the world of this film is going to be a better place once the bad guys aren't there anymore. But that's not Eric's reason for doing what he's doing, and so it's not something I've stopped to consider a great deal. The crow in the film, the bird in the film, you could really just look at as a guide, almost a piece of his own personality that guides him back into his life and reminds him who he was, what happened to him. This is a person who has been pushed right to the limits of his ability to cope with what is going on, and in a sense is quite mad sometimes. In a sense is completely insane. Almost in the sense that you might think of an insane person having voices, you know, more rational voices that try and guide him, more irrational voices that come from a more emotional, more deep-seated place. I think that the crow is that rational voice. The crow is his guide. The crow helps Eric do what he has to do in a very practical sense. It leads him to the places that he has to be. It helps him find the people that he has to find. Come on. It's a story about justice for victims. And in the real world, as far as we know, the situation in this film does not take place where a victim is given the opportunity to seek justice. But you know, you just look around in the world and you kind of wish that it did. But things usually aren't that clear-cut. Even if someone who does commit some atrocity like the men in this film do, and even if they are caught, then they fall into the jurisdiction of our court systems, which are imperfect at best. And I think that the appeal of Eric's mission is that it is a very pure one. He has come back to seek justice for himself and for the woman he loved, and in a sense, for anyone who is victimized and has never had the chance to seek justice.
One of these was a life you helped destroy.
His mission is to find the men who killed him and his fiancée and kill them.
Gentlemen! I just want him.
It's a wonderful role, and it really is a role that you have to take risks with, and it gives you a wonderful opportunity to take those risks and stretch, because you tell me how somebody who comes back from the dead is going to behave, you know? And that's one of the wonderful things about playing this character is it's a real... You can really take the gloves off in playing this part, because there are no rules about how a person who has come back from the dead is going to behave.
Listen! I'm sure you'll remember. You killed him on Halloween.
You can't be you. We put you through the window. There ain't no coming back.
And then there's the part of him that is filled with rage towards what was done to him. And one of the things I like best about this movie is the fact that all of those parts of the character are given balance on the screen. He's torn up. He's torn up really badly, emotionally, physically, and psychically.
She died at the hospital.
Don't touch me!
I saw her through your eyes.
I think that the appeal of Eric's mission is that it is a very pure one. He has come back to seek justice. I've done other films that have had violence in them, but I must say I've never done anything where I felt that the violence was as justified as it is in this. There's very little need to worry about compassion.
Victims. Aren't we all?
This is justice, you know? And I truly feel that it is. And I truly feel that if I were in the same situation, I would do the same thing. He has something he has to do, and he is forced to put aside his own pain long enough to go do what he has to do.
To tell the rest of them that death is coming for them. Tonight.
This film deals with the concept of a balance being struck between good and evil.
I gave this to Shelley once. I think she'd like you to have it.
Because we do not know when we will die, we get to think of life as an inexhaustible well. And yet everything happens only a certain number of times, and a very small number, really. How many more times will you remember a certain afternoon of your childhood? An afternoon that is so deeply a part of your being that you can't even conceive of your life without it. Perhaps 4 or 5 times more. Perhaps not even that. How many more times will you watch the full moon rise? Perhaps 20. And yet it all seems limitless.
Little things used to mean so much to Shelley. I used to think they were kind of trivial. Believe me, nothing is trivial.
This is the point of view that this character is coming from in the whole film, because it has been brought sharply into focus for him how precious each moment of his life is.
I love you.
Say that again.
I love you.
I don't know if I was destined to play this role, but I feel very fortunate to be doing so. This is, this is the best role that I've had the opportunity to get my hands on in a film. I thought to myself, if I were given the opportunity after a year of having been dead to come back, who would I want to share it with? Who would I want to see? And the person I would want to see would be my fiancée, Eliza, because I'm engaged, I'm getting married after the film. This is, like I said, it's a wonderful role, and it really is a role that you have to take risks with, and it gives you a wonderful opportunity to take those risks and stretch, because you tell me how somebody who comes back from the dead is going to behave, you know? You trot a couple people out and tell me, that's not how somebody who comes back from the dead behaves, you know? I don't think so. So as long as, it's like when you do something like this, you create rules within the piece, and I feel like as long as you do not violate the rules that you have created, and once you start to give life to something like this, as long as you continue to be truthful to what you've created, then it's going to work, and you have to respect that. But it's a very interesting part. He had a knife, and I had taken the knife away from him, and I'm sitting on the guy with the knife, and I've got the knife pressed up against the corner of his eye, and I'm just sitting on him. So the cops come, and the car screeches to a halt, and I stand up, and I take a couple steps away from the guy, and I toss the knife out into the street, and I put my hands up over my head, and I yell at the top of my lungs, "I'm the good guy! I'm the good guy!" Was I destined to play this role? I don't know if I was destined to play this role, but I feel very fortunate to be doing so. This is, this is the best role that I've had the opportunity to get my hands on in a film.